Okay, guys, in this video, we are going to discuss the various acts of bravery that Moshe does in the second half of Shemot Perek Bet, starting in Pasuk Yud Aleph. So in terms of the simple pshat, there are three incidents. Incident number one consists of Moshe seeing an Egyptian beating a Jew, and Moshe defends the Jew by killing the Egyptian. He strikes the Egyptian, and then he buries the Egyptian in sand, hoping that there won't be a body, he won't get caught. The next day, Moshe goes out and sees two Jews fighting, two Hebrews fighting, and he says to one of them, who apparently was the aggressor, because he's called the Rasha, Ve'omer la Rasha, Lama takerecha. He says to the aggressor, why are you hitting the other guy? So I think in class we discussed, are these really two separate incidents? Incident one, killing the Egyptian, and incident two, breaking up a fight. Perhaps you could call them incident 1A and 1B, because they're obviously related. Right? Breaking up the fight between Jews right away connects to the earlier story, because the aggressor there, the Rasha, says back to Moshe, who put you in charge? You're going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? So these two stories are clearly related. But for convenience sake, we're going to call them incident one, where he kills the Egyptian who was beating a Jew, and incident two, where he breaks up a fight between two Jews. And then as a result of incident one, Paro hears what happened. He hears that Moshe killed an Egyptian taskmaster. He wants to kill Moshe. Moshe runs away to Midian. When he gets to Midian, he finds the daughters of the priest of Midian, who we later are going to learn was named Yitro, even though here it seems he's called Reuel. He has these 7 daughters who are trying to draw water, and the other shepherds are bullying them. The other male shepherds come and chase them away. The garesh is to chase away or expel. And Moshe sticks up for them. Vayakom Moshe vayoshian. Moshe, Loshia is to save, right? Like Yeshua, salvation. So Moshe saves them, vayash getzonam, and he gives water to their sheep. The Torah doesn't say a lot about what he did here. It's not clear. Was he actually violent? Did he beat up the shepherds? Did he simply threaten to beat them up and that was enough to scare them away? Did he just tell them, hey, it's not nice? And they were so stunned it was the first time anyone stood up for these women that alone scared them off. We don't know if Moshe is violent here. Again, incident one, Moshe clearly was violent because Vayachat HaMitzri, he smote the Egyptian and he buried him in sand, so obviously he killed him. Incident two, Moshe just spoke to the other guy, to the Jew, and said, why are you hitting your friend? Incident number three, where none of the characters are Jewish, right? It's Midianite women and Midianite men. Vayoshian, he saved the women. We don't know exactly how in any sort of detail. And so this begs the question about Moshe's behaviors here. In each of these cases, is Moshe being driven by nationalistic pride in his Jewishness, that he sees a Jew being bullied or Jews engaged in bad behavior, and he feels Jew to Jew, he has to speak to them? Or is he driven more by sort of human values, and he sees a victim, whatever the victim's race is, whatever the victim's religion is, he feels he has to save the victim because as a decent human being, he doesn't like seeing other humans suffer unfairly. So it seems the easiest story to answer this question for is the final story over here with the shepherds, because nobody in that story is Jewish, and so doesn't seem to be any Jewish dimension, certainly in the narrow sense of seeing a Jew doing something bad and being angry, how could a Jew do that? Or seeing a Jewish victim and saying, how could a Jew get victimized like that? I think one or two of you in class said, well, look, on some level, his Jewishness is part of what gives him his good values. So yeah, in the same way that sometimes when you hear about, a Jewish environmental activist who says, because I'm Jewish and Jews believe that God created the world, therefore I care about preserving the world that I believe that God created, so my environmental activism is part of my Jewish values. In that sense, you could say that, standing up for a victim in general is part of his Jewish values. The fact that he knows what it was like for his fellow Jews to suffer in Egypt, because he just saw that earlier in the parak. Maybe that's part of why he feels bad for a non-Jewish victim as well. But in the narrow sense of narrow Jewish interests, there's no narrow Jewish interest in a conflict between Midianite women, who are the daughters of the Midianite priest, and Midianite men who are bullying them, Midianite male shepherds. And so this story, it seems Moshe is primarily acting as a human being who's upset to see human beings being victimized, and therefore Vayoshian. He stands up, he saves the weaker humans, in this case the women, from the men who are bullying them. What about the other stories? So that's a little bit less clear, right? There's a Jewish element to the first two incidents, but on the other hand, maybe as a decent human being, even if you weren't Jewish, you might feel bad for a slave who's getting beaten, or you might feel bad for two people being in a fight. You might feel they shouldn't be fighting, and you have to intervene to break up the fight. So we looked back at the first story here, and we noticed when Moshe first grows up and goes out to see what's going on, sees this situation of Egyptians beating Jews, the Torah twice in the same pasuk uses the word echav, his brothers. Moshe went out to see his brother's situation, and what did he see? He saw an Egyptian man beating up Ish Ivri me echav, one of his Jewish brothers. It seems to be emphasizing the Jewishness of the victim. And the Seforno correctly observed this, so we turn to the Seforno, and he says, look, Moshe went out to see their suffering. Natan li bo lirot ba'oni echav. Moshe gave his heart, right? He really gave of himself to see his brother's suffering. Oni can mean poverty in the narrow sense. Here it means suffering more broadly. And so he sees again one of his brothers getting beaten up. Umitzad ha'achva hitorer lehinakem. It says the Seforno, right? Echav. The Torah is saying that from the side, the angle of achva, of kinship, of brotherly feelings for the Jewish victim, that's why Moshe sort of woke up, had this awakening to seek nekama, to seek vengeance, to fight for the Jew. And so I think part of what seems to be driving the Seforno here is why is Moshe so violent, right? We, I think, discussed separately, was it really necessary to kill the Egyptian here? So the Seforno, I think, is praising Moshe and saying, well, Moshe's instinct was to be so harsh, to really lower the boom on this guy and let him have it, because Moshe not only saw a human victim suffering, but it was dafka, a human to whom he felt achva. And so he's not thinking here legally, as what the Egyptians did, a grave enough offense to warrant the death penalty. Rather, he just really, really fired up. He sees a Jew getting abused, and he's a Jew himself. He says, hey, that's my brother. You can't do that to my brother. And without even thinking, sort of on Moshe's Jewish pride instincts, his gut reaction is to hit the Egyptian so hard he kills him. The next day, Moshe sees two Jews fighting, and Seforno says over here, how come we don't see Moshe getting violent here? How come we don't see Moshe going to the aggressor in this brawl the next day and killing him? So Seforno says, because here Moshe realizes they're both Jewish, he can't bring himself from he doesn't have that same instinctive response of killing the aggressor when both sides are Jewish. And that's why in this case, he's not violent, but he's still bothered by the idea of two Jews fighting. In some ways, that's upsetting. That's upsetting in a different way, that two of his brothers are fighting with each other. And therefore, hochiach b'mishor, he rebuked them literally in a straight way. He's paraphrasing a pasuk from Yeshayahu here, hence the poetic language. Moshe felt the need to rebuke them, hochiach, because he couldn't bear to see two Jews fight. Now, we pointed out what Seforno is saying here, the basic idea we were very fond of, this idea that Moshe in the first case is driven by love of Jews in the sense that he can't bear to see his brother suffer. In the second case, it's a different type of love of Jews. In the second case, it's that he can't bear to see two Jews fight, and the response to that's a little different. But the fact that Moshe is violent in the first case, it doesn't have to be only because of that. I like what the Seforno says. It could also be that maybe Moshe wasn't as violent in the second case, because maybe the level of violence of the other parties wasn't as grave, right? We don't know exactly how violent the Egyptian is being when it says Makeh Ish Ivri. We don't know how violent the Jew is being when Moshe says to him, Lama takerecha. Lahakot can mean to hit. It can even mean to kill. If you click on the word on Al HaTorah, it's going to have a long entry, right? Smite. Then it gives you all these nuances, right? Inflicting of injury. So that implies just like hurting someone. But sometimes smitten with a weapon in battle and dying, right? This word is kind of vague. Is it talking about just hitting or hitting with such force as to kill someone? And so you see there's a long, long discussion here, which we're not going to go through. But you get the basic idea that this word is vague. And so it could, if you wanted to argue with Seforno, you'd say, well, maybe in the first case, the Egyptian was beating the Jews so badly, the Jew's life was in danger. And so Moshe had to kill the Egyptian. Whereas in the second case, Moshe was just witnessing a brawl. Two people were having a bit of a fist fight or a shoving match or something like that, but no one's life was in danger. Also, another difference on the practical level is that Moshe can't really just injure the Egyptian. If he gives the Egyptian a black eye and a bloody nose, the guy is going to call the Egyptian police, and Moshe is going to get in trouble for that. And so the only way if Moshe is going to get involved, the only way he thinks he might pull this off and get away with it is if the Egyptian is dead and he buries the guy's body, so there's no evidence. Whereas with the two Jews, Moshe can just say, "Hey guys, knock it off." Nevertheless, I think the Seforno has a very valid point that a lot of what's running through Moshe's mind here in both these stories is that the Jews involved are his brothers and the Egyptian is not. And this is a big deal because Moshe was raised in Paro's palace. It's not a given that Moshe has to feel that way. Moshe might have felt like, we're going to be told by Hilalavan, he was a son to Bat Paro. He might have felt, I'm Bat Paro's adopted son, I'm an Egyptian. And so it's interesting that you see between his mother, his biological Jewish mother, nursing him as a kid, and obviously Bat Paro as well gave him some Jewish identity because she names him Moshe after the fact that he was drawn from the water. So through all that, you see that Moshe has enough of a Jewish identity that he feels the Jews are his brothers. And that causes him to stick up for a Jewish victim. It also causes him later to try and break up a fight between Jews by rebuking them. The Seforno then turns to the third event when he's in Midian, and he says, what's Moshe doing over there? It says Vayoshian, he saved them. What exactly does that mean? It doesn't sound like he got really violent. He didn't kill anybody there, else the Torah would tell us that. So it says Seforno, how come he doesn't kill the shepherds here? Biyot shnei ba'alei hariv nochrim, since both parties to the fight were Gentiles, lo hitover lehinakim. Moshe didn't get all riled up to be violent here. He doesn't have that instinctive response of like, how could he mess with my Jewish brothers? I'm going to kill you. So he's not violent. On the other hand, on the other hand, he's not so interested in the details of these shepherds' character to start rebuking them and talking to them and say, hey guys, bullying is unbecoming of a Jew, the way he kind of says to the Jewish men, right? Why are you hitting your friend? He doesn't say that. All he does, he gets up and says, I'm going to do something to save the victim. So Seforno doesn't say what Moshe does, but it sounds like he thinks Moshe's behavior here with the word Vayoshian is somewhere in between killing, right? He doesn't kill anyone. It's less violent than that, but it sounds like more aggressive than just talking. Maybe he gets up and, waves his stick threateningly, but doesn't actually hit anyone. And so Seforno says he's not being as gentle as he was when the two parties were Jews, but he's not being as violent as when one of them was beating up the Jews as a matter of persecuting a Jew. Here it's just two human beings where one's bullying the other, and so Moshe just gets involved to some degree in a vague way to try and protect the Jewish victim. So all of this is Seforno's approach, and again, some of the finer points we could debate. The one thing Seforno doesn't really get into is exactly how violent each of these parties was, and therefore how much violence might have been necessary just to save the victim. It does seem the shepherds were not that violent, and so Moshe would have had no reason to kill anyone there. Right? It says the shepherds came and chased the women away. It doesn't say they beat the women or tried to kill the women. And so Moshe wouldn't really have been in the right if he had actually killed the shepherds there anyway. But Seforno adds to that, look, Moshe had no desire to kill them because this wasn't a case of persecuting his own people, and so he wasn't quite as worked up as at the beginning of the story number 1. But he still was somewhat worked up because he sees victims of persecution, and Moshe cares enough that he sticks up for them as well. And so here in sum, what we see for sure here, I think, is a mix of Moshe's concern for all humanity, as evidenced in the shepherd story, and an extra concern he has for his own people, which the Torah hints to by saying again and again, with the first story, that he saw one of his brothers getting beaten up. Seforno has a particular way of reading these motivations where he says the combination of an innocent victim and that innocent victim being a Jew is what makes Moshe get really aggressive and violent in the first story. When both parties were at the same level, if they were both Jews, Moshe can't bring himself to be violent at all. He only speaks to them. And in a way, he cares to speak to them because he wants to refine their character, because it's his people, they should act like Jews. And then this third story where nobody's Jewish, he doesn't care to refine their character in the sense of talking to them. He's also not going to kill over that, but he's going to get involved in some level, sort of push and shove his way in. I don't know, maybe wave his stick threateningly, do something to make sure that even a human victim who's not Jewish can't be bullied and threatened.